You hear the uneven footsteps first. That's how you know she's behind you. The heel is broken off her left shoe and she drags it across the ground with every step. Sharp contrast to the steady click of her still intact pump. "Help me," she whispers. It's an urgent, anguished plea. "Please, I'm hurt. Help me." Don't turn around. That's when she gets you. Don't run. She still gets you. But this time, she's going to make it hurt. At least, that's the rumour anyway. Every small town has at least one. A local urban legend that everyone knows and swears is true, because their sister's best friend's cousin's neighbour's grandson knew a fellow who actually encountered it. Ours was a limping woman, so named for her aforementioned distinct gait. It was said that she was a teacher at the elementary school some decades before, young, beautiful, and the victim of a terrible murder. She's been walking home to the house she shared with her parents one night after school, when she realised she was being followed. She sped up, and so did her pursuer, until both were running down this dark country lane with only open farmland on either side. Her heel broke and her ankle snapped. She fell. And then her pursuer became the murderer. It was a slow, torturous affair that left her beaten and covered in stab wounds. And when the killer was done, he just left her to bleed out on the side of the road. She wasn't found until the next morning, and by then all anyone could do was search for the person responsible. While some believe the man was caught and dealt with not long after, others think he or she is still at large, and the limping woman, that the victim came to be known, won't rest until her killer is caught. I was always sceptical at best of the story. I'd passed the spot where she was supposed to appear 100 times without incident, as did everyone else I knew. If a murderous ghost lived there, I was pretty sure I would have seen her. I said as much to my friend Steffi when she brought up that a friend of a friend of a friend had met the limping woman during lunch at school one day. "It's true, she was out on the old highway a couple of nights ago and saw her," Steffi insisted stubbornly over our sandwiches. "If she actually saw her, wouldn't she be dead?" I asked. "I thought you weren't supposed to turn around." "Heard her, whatever, you know what I mean, Rena." "Sure," I said with a roll of my eyes. It's always frustrated Steffi that I didn't share her willingness to believe the unbelievable. "So, how'd she get away?" "She said the words, duh." "Oh right, the woman's last words. Last words we all somehow know without ever having caught the one person who would have heard them. We know them because the real killer was never caught. He told people who told other people. And we all just magically knew to use them to ward off being killed," I finished for her. Steffi frowned. She loved all things spooky and supernatural, and had spent a lot of time researching our local legends, especially the limping woman. "It's not magic, it just reminds her of her own mother, and she gets distracted by her grief and leaves you alone." Okay, I said, hoping that would be enough to put an end to the topic. It was an argument neither of us would win, and I didn't feel like getting into it, again, over whether or not ghosts were real. At 15, it was starting to feel silly. Steffi, however, wasn't going to let me off so easily. They say that she remains because they got the wrong guy and she's angry about it. Like, everyone knew it, but no one cared because they wanted to blame someone. Don't you feel at least a little bit bad for her? She's still waiting for justice after all this time. Steffi, she only goes out after people who don't believe in her, you know? I didn't like the way Steffi said that. Like she had an idea for me that I wouldn't approve of, and I shook my head. Whatever it is, no. We could go out there, out to the spot that she haunts. No, don't be dumb, I said. You don't believe anyway, so what's the big deal? I've walked past there a lot, okay? Nothing's ever happened. Have you gone after dark? Steffi had started to smile. No, but so what? That's when she's active. Going in the day doesn't count. This is dumb, I said again. We'll go tonight. Every argument I had was met with questions of whether I was too afraid and Steffi mocking me for being chicken. She kept it up for the rest of lunch, through our shared science class, and then passed me notes in the halls between classes after that. And by the time the final bell rang, she had worn me down. But not because I believe she's there. I made sure she knew. I'm just going to shut you up. The sun set just after 5 that evening. At 7, we met up on our bikes in front of my neighbourhood. Her parents thought she was doing a project at mine, and mine thought I was at hers. And we had 2 hours to ride out to the farm where the limping woman was said to haunt and get back before they started trading phone calls. We pedalled hard and fast, leaving behind the glow from windows and street lamps until darkness swallowed up the world around us. With only moonlight to guide us, we wove our way across town and passed into the outskirts, where the insects were louder and the stars were brighter, and the safety that came from feeling like you were surrounded by other people fell away. It was hard not to feel entirely exposed out on that old road, where flat fields rolled off into the distance on either side. There was the occasional barn or farmhouse set a ways off down some long, dusty drives, but otherwise, it really was just us and our bikes and the night. Up ahead, Steffi said from behind me. See the cross? That's the marker for her. We skid to a stop a few yards away from it and exchanged a glance, almost lost in the shadows. Scared? She said, breathless with excitement. No, I said. It was an honest enough answer. I was nervous, sure, but who wouldn't be when you're outside after dark? Remember, if you turn around, she gets you. If you try to run, she makes it worse. Just stand still when she's close by and say the words. Steffi spoke so seriously that I had to stifle a giggle. It was ridiculous. I kept trying to tell that to all the butterflies stirring in my stomach, but it didn't do much good. We climbed off our bikes and set them on their kickstand. Steffi groped about for my hand and entwined her fingers with mine. She was shaking. Ready? Let's just get this over with, I replied. We walked up to where the cross was placed and paused. Steffi squeezed my hand and took in a slow, shuddering breath. Her fear was starting to have an effect on me, quickening my heartbeat. But I squared my shoulders and clenched my jaw and took a step forward. We crept along the roadside, careful to keep our eyes pointed straight ahead. Steffi kept reminding me in a trembling whisper that looking anywhere else could lead to trouble. A minute or two passed. It couldn't have been longer despite feeling like it, and nothing seemed to happen. My fear began to ebb, replaced by an admittedly relieved giddiness that I'd been right, and I almost turned to Steffi to say, I told you so. And then I realised how quiet it was. All the insects that had been singing loudly when we arrived had gone silent. There were no distant calls from night birds, no breeze passing over us, nothing. Just the sound of our own breathing. To my surprise, Steffi sighed, disappointed. I wondered if she realised how quiet everything had become. How could she not feel how claustrophobic it had become out on the open road? How closed off we were in the dark and the silence. I wanted to ask her, but the question was like a knot in my throat that I couldn't untangle. Behind us, Grass rustled, followed by the crunch of loose gravel underfoot, like someone was pulling themselves slowly out of the field onto the road. Every hair on my body stood up at once. Rena? I hadn't realised that my grip on Steffi's hand had tightened so much. I could feel her eyes on me, but couldn't bring myself to look at her. From somewhere over my shoulder, a woman started to sob softly. "Help me," she cried plaintively. "Rena?" Steffi said again. She's coming," I managed to whisper. Instead of being scared, Steffi snorted. "Real funny. I get it, okay? The limping woman is just made up. I'm convinced now. You don't have to rub it in." The unmistakable sound of someone inching towards us, slowly, painfully, crying out with each step. "Please," she begged. "I'm hurt and he's still out there." "Steffi," I hissed, tears burning in my eyes. "She's coming." There must have been something in my voice, a tightness that only true terror could cause, that convinced my friend that I wasn't just pretending. She grabbed my forearm with her other hand and clutched it until her nails were digging into my skin. "She only goes after people who don't believe," Steffi said. "That must be why." "What do I do?" I begged. My mind went white and blank. My entire body was screaming to run, to get away from that thing that was getting closer and closer. But Steffi's firm grasp and my own mounting dread held me in place. "Please," the whimpering woman sobbed. "Turn around. Help me." "The words," Steffi said hurriedly. "You have to say the words when she's right behind you." What words? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't speak or think. I could only hear her. Legend said you hear her uneven footsteps and be forced to listen to her pleas. But no one ever mentioned the smell. The stench of rotten earth and blood oozed through the air, slowly surrounding me, wrapping itself around me like tentacles, smothering me. I gagged and pressed my free hand over my mouth and shook my head violently, trying to clear it, trying to make sense of things. Steffi was jerking on my arm and saying something to me, over and over again, but I could barely hear her over the limping woman's cries. The smell was getting so strong, making my stomach pitch, heave, until I thought I could be sick. I leaned heavily on Steffi and she pulled me in close that her lips were beside my ear. Through the veil of panic and nausea, I heard her scream, "Say the words!" The limping woman was so close behind us now that I could feel the chill radiating off of her. The words, I thought. I had to say the words. It just reminds me of her own mother, and she gets distracted by her grief and she leaves you alone. I heard Steffi's voice from the previous day echo in my head. Her mother. The words remind me of her mother. The limping woman's last words. "Please." Bile rose in the back of my throat. My mother's waiting for me." The footsteps stopped and were replaced by a high-pitched, heart-wrenching keen. From somewhere off in the night, a dog had started to howl. Insects began to sing again. The wind whistled across the field. Sounds of normalcy, of life. The limping woman continued to screech while I found my legs and, with Steffi in tow, tore back to the bikes. I never once looked up from the ground. The only thing I saw as we darted were a pair of feet in torn stockings and pumps. The heel of one was once missing. We didn't stop riding until we made it back to my lawn, and when we got there, I raced to the bushes on the side of the house and vomited. Steffi claims she didn't hear or see anything that night, but she believes that I did. She believes that I encountered the limping woman. I tried to come up with some kind of rationalisation for it, like power of suggestion or something. But when I think back to those footsteps and those sobs and the final scream, I know that there is only one explanation, and now I too believe in the limping woman. My wife Steph and I have been together for about 2 years now. We met at college and hit it off right away. Steph was orphaned when she was very young, so she'd been raised by her grandfather until she went off to school and met me. I didn't know much about her grandfather, other than that he was extremely protective of her, almost verging on paranoid. Still, he passed away before I got the chance to meet him, so I never really gave him much thought, other than to comfort Steph. Well, that was until we found out that he owned something like 900 acres of forest. Steph was his only living descendant, so she was given the deed and a keyring pertaining to the house that she'd never seen before. What a 23-year-old girl was going to do with all that, I don't know. All I know is that when she told me about her new land, I knew we had to go and check it out. As we drove up, I asked her if she'd been to this house in the forest before. She said, "Listen, I didn't even know this place existed. I've no idea why Gramps would keep this from me." It was pretty clear that she was still taking to his death pretty hard. No wonder really. He basically raised her after all. The drive up into the mountains from our college took a couple of hours. The forest was thick with pine and oak trees growing close to the road. The further we got from civilization, the worse the roads got. Potholes, broken branches, and even grass had begun to sprout out in some places. Our plan was to stay the night at the house, but if that didn't pan out, we brought a tent as well. Our GPS had us turn off on the gravel road. This road wound and twisted around turns and rocky outcroppings. It was pretty clear that it was leading us down into a valley. After half an hour or so, on this new road, we saw the house out in front of us. The house had clearly been abandoned for decades. I'd brought my camera with us, so I took a picture of it right as we stepped out of the car. And here is that picture. Steph was pretty clearly disappointed. Well, I guess it was too much to hope for someone to be caring for it all this time. Stretching my legs after all that time in the car was really nice. Steph walked up to the house to check it out, and I warned her that the ground might be rotted out and to be careful. I started walking around the house and took up another picture, and here is that second picture. I came back to the house and walked in the front door. The inside was a mess, all rotten wood and dirt. I was honestly surprised if it was still standing at all. I stuck my head back outside and my eye caught on something. There was a tree growing just to the right of the house. I saw 4 long, deep claw marks in the base of the tree, a few months old at least. I raised my camera and took a picture, and here is that picture. That was when I heard Steph shriek. I ran back around the front of the house and saw her standing in front of something rotten. When I took a closer look, I saw it was a deer carcass. I told Steph that we're most definitely in bear country, then took a picture of the deer. Only thing was, it looked like the deer had been cut open with a bunch of razor blades. Bears don't normally do that. Here is the picture, and warning, it is quite graphic. The sun soon set after that. We took out our tent inside the house and found a nice flat spot to set it up. I busted out my gas grill and made us a couple of hamburgers. We were sitting in our camp chairs inside the house and feeling pretty good by the time it got completely dark. Steph was looking at me pretty amazed. I asked her why she looked so surprised. It's just, I've never been camping before. It's different than I imagined. She looked down at her phone. Less cell service at least. I decided to ask some more about Steph's grandpa. "Why do you think he never told us about any of this? And why didn't he ever take you camping?" I asked. "I don't know." I went on for a while about how cool I thought the property was. Plans for our future parties with friends, bonfires and all that. Clouds had rolled in, so all the light was just from our little lantern I'd bought. And pretty soon we'd headed inside the tent, zipped up the door, and were ready for bed. Steph had already fallen asleep when it happened. All the sounds from outside, all the crickets and birds and owls stopped in an instant. Laying in my sleeping bag inside the tent, the silence was deafening. And that's when I heard it. A distant clicking noise echoed from in the forest. I lay in silence, trying to guess what kind of animal it might have made that sound. It was so loud that Steph actually woke up next to me and asked what it was. And I told her I didn't know. Then I heard the clicking noise again, extremely close. So close it seemed like it might be right next to the house. I slipped out of my sleeping bag, stood inside the tent and grabbed my camera. I walked up to the tent door and zipped it down as quietly as I could. Then I snuck the camera out into the darkness and took a picture. In the flash, I saw a hand reaching through the broken window of the house. It almost looked human, but it was deathly white and had long claws extending from each finger. Through the window I saw what looked like a human silhouette with two bright yellow eyes staring in it towards us. I can't be sure, but it looked like there was blood around its mouth. I pulled the camera back and zipped the tent door closed. And this is the picture that I took. Steph sat up. "What is it?" she asked. I moved next to her and covered her mouth with my hand. My heart was racing and I felt all the hairs on my body standing up. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Silence. For a long moment I heard nothing. Then the clicking sound echoed out from where I knew that the door of the house was. Steph stared at me, her eyes clearly confused and afraid. She put her hand on mine and tried to pull it away, but I shook my head and didn't take it off. Silence again. I strained to hear, but nothing. For what must have been 2 minutes, I sat with my hand on Steph's mouth. Then I heard the clicking for just a few feet outside of the tent door. I have no idea how it got so close without making any sound. I froze for a moment. Then, as quietly as I could, I reached into my pants laying on the ground and pulled out my car keys. I hit the unlock button twice. My car's horn beeped loudly from where we were parked in front of the house. Silence again. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I heard the clicking out from where my car was parked in front of the house. The clicking echoed out a few more times, but each one was further and further away. After half an hour or so, the crickets started back up and the forest sounded alive again. Steph stared at me. "What did you see?" I told her to get dressed and to be ready to run. We got dressed in the tent and I opened the door. We ran to where the car was, jumped in it and sped away. And I didn't stop until we reached home. The next morning I went out to my car and saw this on the hood. And this is the picture I taken the following morning. Has anyone else had any experiences like this? I'll update the story if anything new happens. My neighbour is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water. All the while screaming, "Epic win, epic fail," or "fuck, epic maintenance of the status quo," for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in pursuit of viral fame. So when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I could get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills and a bit of spam and what I could only assume was a birthday card. Then one evening I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written, "Return to sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house even harder, and I quickly realised there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I'd kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down whilst I struggled to open the tricky door. But you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. No point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package, and it fell to the ground, and I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I wouldn't tell my neighbour about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over on me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbour would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it, until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to the house, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly sweet odour similar to a skunk, and for the first few days I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realised that the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for the source. And that's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odour knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. And I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to be so large and heavy? An entire freaking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough that the bottom to poke out with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. The soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. I tried to drag it out whole. Everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat into the garbage bag one at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled the scent mingling with the horrors coming out of that box. I'm not ashamed to admit, I ran out the door for a breath of fresh air. But in the short time I'd spent in the garage, the smell had only become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers or a change of clothes. Every second that box lay in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open, though it was inviting me to look. I was prepared. A clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. but as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbour. Dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops and naturally they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with a corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realised I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box. The smell might have left a mark throughout my house. But there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbour's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt bad for me. They figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbour was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and then presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours or days, I'm honestly not sure. My neighbour recorded a few clips in his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. It must be in a warehouse, pretty warm here. Still got plenty of food. That kind of stuff. And then on his last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck and that was it. The camera recorded until the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door